If you've been gaming for a while, you no doubt have a list of must-play games that you just haven't found the time to play. Your backlog. I have more than a handful of these games on this list, and now I can cross one more off, thankfully. The original Titanfall launched as an Xbox exclusive at the worst possible time, immediately following the mostly dreadful Xbox One reveal. What a disaster that was.
Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
All right. So stick with 360. That's your message if you don't like it?
If you...
Titanfall was poised to be the next big thing in a lot of ways. It was from the people behind the red-hot Call of Duty series. It evolved the formula of that game into something fast and kinetic in a way that Call of Duty wasn't, and had EA's financial backing. It seemed very likely to take the gaming world by storm, but then it landed with a thud. While the gameplay and the online experience were very solid, dare I say good, it was literally just that, an online-only game. There wasn't a single-player experience to speak of. In today's gaming landscape, this is pretty common and not at all unusual, but back in 2014, it was not welcome. Having a great multiplayer mode was, well, great. But single player was expected since a lot of players either didn't have access to a good internet connection or simply didn't care for multiplayer experiences. And when you couple this with the negative press surrounding the Xbox One and its always online requirement, it just leaves a nasty taste in your mouth. But don't let that fool you into thinking Titanfall was somehow bad, because it wasn't. It put players in the shoes of a pilot who had the ability to run around on foot, run along walls, ground slide, and double jump. The pilots were very nimble characters to play as. On the flip side, the pilots were linked to a Titan, a huge mech with its own capabilities unique to that of the pilot. Think of these as a personal tank for each and every player, and you've got the right idea. Titanfall was also unique for its level design. Most of the stages had strong vertical elements, allowing players to master those parkour skills while keeping the action tight and focused. This also lends itself to the Titan play, as you'd frequently need to rely on the verticality of the environments to take on these behemoths. Likewise, the levels were all equipped with their share of indoor environments, which the Titans simply had no way to access. This helped keep things balanced and prevented players from solely relying on their Titans to mow down their foes. In addition to all of this were the bots. Essentially, each match would be filled up with bots if there weren't enough players. This was obviously done to keep up the intensity of each match, and honestly, I thought it was pretty cool. It was definitely less satisfying to take these things out, but they kept things frantic just like they were supposed to. Fast forward a bit and we learned that the game sold fairly well, and with the critical reception being mostly positive, EA was convinced to greenlight a sequel. This time, however, it would be developed for the PlayStation 4 in addition to the Xbox One and PC. And more importantly, it'd feature a full-on single-player story mode, in addition to its multiplayer mode, of course. I vividly remember reading this news and thinking it must be a reaction to Activision and the success it was seeing with Call of Duty. Activision was on a hot streak with its military shooter series, and EA desperately wanted a piece of that action. It was clear in a number of ways. They had attempted to utilize Battlefield to fill this gap, but failed to recognize how different the two series actually were. Call of Duty was a smaller scale, almost close quarters type of shooter, whereas Battlefield typically had huge, expansive environments with a metric ton of vehicles and weapons, as well as a robust class system. And so, Titanfall was poised to compete directly with Call of Duty, since it too had smaller maps and a greater focus on close quarters combat, in addition to the Titans, of course. And that brings us to Titanfall 2, the shooter that aims to best Call of Duty in multiplayer while also delivering a similarly robust and action-packed single-player campaign. And it's that campaign that I'm focusing on today. Titanfall 2 starts out as you would expect, with a tutorial. Thankfully, it's not terribly drawn out or anything, and the game does really require a bit of prep, especially if you hadn't played the first game. As you would expect, the tutorial is cut a bit short when you're attacked and forced to enter real, non-simulated combat. The story seems pretty straightforward at first. You're on the side of the good guys and are fighting against the bad guys. Everyone has mechs of their own, and most of the enemies look the same, sans a red highlight telling you they are indeed bad. The shooting is very snappy and thus very Call of Duty-like. This is obviously a very good thing, as the shooting is probably the standout feature of any Call of Duty game, if you really break it down. The double jumps all feel as you would expect, and the wall running is adequate as well. Though there are certainly times when you'll have to combine these two functions, and it doesn't always go as planned, leading to some cheap deaths. I would have liked to see them iron this out a bit more, but it is serviceable as is. On the flip side, these mechanics do lend themselves to a bit of platforming, something that isn't typically found in a game like Call of Duty, and if I'm being honest, isn't always handled super well from the first-person perspective. Even if the implementation here isn't perfect, it definitely breaks up the pace of the game without taking away control from the player, so I can at least appreciate that. The ground slide maneuver, thankfully, is never really needed, but gives you added mobility that is hard to shrug off. I mean, there are a few things cooler than sliding across the ground toward your enemy, only to blast him point blank. And when you combine this showy mechanic with the snappy shooting, it makes for an extremely cool feeling shooter. And in addition to all of this are the Titans themselves. These hulking machines are not fully dependent on the player and do act on their own. Whether it's providing cover fire or throwing you across a huge chasm, your Titan is always at your side. Furthermore, the ease with which you can jump in and out of the pilot seat of these things adds significantly to the cool factor.
Wind 3 knots, heading 274, range 95 meters, projectile mass 89 kilograms. Trust me.
Speaking of the Titans, they can be equipped with various loadouts as the campaign progresses, and each of them has their own strengths and weaknesses. For example, you'll start off with a somewhat standard machine gun-like weapon, but this is complemented with the ability to capture incoming projectiles in a stasis field before launching them back at your enemies. Another option in this initial loadout is the ability to lock onto multiple targets at a time before unloading a barrage of rockets at them. Special abilities like these require a cooldown after use, so you can't simply spam them. When you consider that your Titan can have up to 8 different loadouts, it's easy to see how this mechanic is pretty integral to the overall experience. As far as the story goes, you'll start off in a pretty grim state. You're downed and an enemy Titan is about to squash you like a bug before you're saved by one of your own. After a brief skirmish, the Titan's pilot is injured and you're given pilot status in order to take over his Titan and continue the mission. From here, things feel somewhat standard as far as the story goes. For a while anyways. Eventually you will start to uncover the truth about whatever the enemy has cooking and find yourself in some truly ridiculous but cool situations. At this point, I'm going to give a spoiler warning. These are the story bits you may want to experience for yourself, so if you intend to play this game, go do that real quick and come back to the video. One of the most gnarly situations involves straight up time travel. At some point, you'll find yourself randomly being yanked into the past before being pulled back to the present. You only get glimpses of whatever happened in the past, so it really starts to make you wonder what exactly is going on. This bit breaks up the pace of the game really well, because it allows you to avoid combat encounters to a degree. It gives you a chance to take it all in and ponder what is happening. After a short bit, you'll come across a device that allows you to switch back and forth at will. This is used in some pretty cool ways. For instance, maybe you'll come across a barrier of some kind in the present. You'll need to jump into the past to get past this barrier. Of course, in doing so, you're setting off some pretty serious alarm bells in the past. Other times, you'll need to do some of the wall running and platforming I mentioned earlier. Except, not all of the needed platforms and walls exist anymore, so you'll have to jump into the past mid-jump, and then back to the present to continue. It can be a bit frustrating in a few areas since the timing needs to be spot on, but overall, I really love this mechanic. At another point in the game, you'll find yourself in a factory of sorts. As you progress, you'll notice they are building what looks like replicas of the common home. Houses with furniture and even yards, all being manufactured within this facility, but for what purpose? Well, eventually you figure it out. These are training grounds being used to increase the combat effectiveness of the enemy soldiers and titans. Now, realistically speaking, this seems way too costly for any real military to pursue, especially in the manner it's presented here, but if you suspend your disbelief a bit, it's a very interesting twist. After making your way through the factory and discovering its purpose, you'll find yourself in a very unfortunate position. You need to take out a Titan without one of your own. Later on, you'll find yourself cruising the skies and have to navigate between moving airships before taking on another Titan atop of one of them. It's a true spectacle, and this game has no shortage of them. On the technical side of things, the graphics are great. Everything looks very realistic and colorful and avoids the military shooter issue of having everything look brown and gray. In fact, I think the game's visual package holds up extremely well against many of today's games. However, there does seem to be some incorrect frame pacing as the game has these micro stutters throughout, as you've no doubt noticed. The frame rate itself seems to be solid and locked to my display's refresh rate, but it's not as smooth as I'd expect. Audio-wise, the music didn't really jump out at me in any way. Not bad, but not especially noteworthy either. And perhaps that's for the best. The voice acting, on the other hand, is especially good. Everyone plays their roles well, and it definitely does feel like a Call of Duty game in this regard. The gaming masses were right. Titanfall 2 does, indeed, have a terrific single-player campaign, which makes the fact that it's in the hands of EA all the more painful. This is a universe worth building, and I feel like there are many stories to tell. Obviously, Respawn was sort of able to continue this world with Apex Legends, but that's just not the same. Perhaps one day EA will decide to release a remastered version of the game, and the modern gaming consumer will embrace it much better than consumers of the past. Titanfall 2 was a wild ride, to say the least, and I hope I've convinced you to give the game a chance. It's still available on modern platforms like Steam, and I highly recommend it. It's a short game, so it won't require a huge time commitment or anything, so give it a go. Anyways, I want to thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on the way out, and I will see you all in the next one.